Zoltan stepped out of his ship and breathed in the artificial air of the human outpost for the first time. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as they adjusted to the bright lights. The gravity felt slightly stronger than he was used to, making his blue-gray skin pull downward uncomfortably. "Welcome to Proxima Centauri Outpost," said the human greeter, a female who identified herself as Susan Clark. "We don't get many Meridian visitors." Zoltan straightened his posture. As a senior xenoanthropologist of the Meridian Collective, he represented an empire that had mastered faster-than-light travel over 3 centuries ago. Humans, by comparison, had only reached beyond their solar system 40 years earlier. "I am honored to study your settlement," Zoltan said through his translator. His true voice made sounds no human could hear. "The collective wishes to understand all emerging species." Susan smiled. Zoltan noted how her facial muscles moved in his research pad. Humans use these expressions frequently. Emerging is a polite way of saying primitive, right? Zoltan's skin flushed purple with embarrassment. "I meant no offense." "None taken. Let me show you around." The outpost was smaller than Zoltan expected. Only 200 humans lived and worked in the connected domes on the rocky surface of Proxima Centauri. They mined rare minerals and conducted space research far from Earth. "This is our maintenance section," Susan said as they entered a large workshop filled with tools and machine parts. "And that's Jack." A male human looked up from the engine he was fixing. He wore a simple gray uniform with oil stains on the sleeves. His hair was brown, cut short, and his face showed the small wrinkles humans developed as they age. "Hey there," Jack said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You must be our alien visitor." Something about this human made Zoltan's skin tingle. His research had taught him to trust his biological reactions. They often detected things his conscious mind missed. "I am Zoltan, xenoanthropologist." Jack smiled. "I'm just Jack Winters. I fix things when they break." Zoltan noticed how the other workers in the room glanced at Jack with strange respect. The man appeared to be in a low position, yet others seemed to defer to him subtly. "Jack keeps this place running," Susan explained. "We'd fall apart without him." Jack shrugged. "Anyone could do my job." Zoltan activated his bioscanner discreetly. The readings showed nothing unusual about Jack. Standard human biology. Normal temperature. Typical brain activity. Yet something felt wrong about those readings. As they continued the tour, Zoltan asked Susan, "How long has Jack worked here?" "About 5 years. He came on the supply ship and just never left. Best decision this outpost ever made." Later that day, Zoltan observed humans in their common area. They ate food, played games, and talked. Jack sat alone, watching the stars through a viewport. Zoltan approached him. "May I join you?" Jack nodded. "The view is better here than anywhere else in the outpost." Zoltan looked out at the stars. "My people have visited thousands of solar systems. We have cataloged millions of planets. And yet there's always more to discover, isn't there?" Jack smiled. "The universe is vast," Zoltan agreed. "Vaster than you know," Jack whispered, almost too quietly for Zoltan to hear. A sudden commotion interrupted them. A young human male rushed into the room. "Commander Lewis wants all section heads. The reactor cooling system is showing problems." Jack stood up calmly. "Tell them I'll be right there." "You're not a section head," Zoltan observed. Jack's eyes seemed to change for just a moment, deeper, older somehow. Then he smiled, and he was just a simple maintenance worker again. "They like my input sometimes. Excuse me." As Jack walked away, Zoltan felt the strange tingling again. The human outpost suddenly seemed more interesting than any he had ever studied before. He decided to watch Jack Winters very carefully in the days ahead. 3 days passed as Zoltan studied the humans at the outpost. He followed their routines, recorded their behaviors, and took detailed notes on their social structure. But his attention kept returning to Jack Winters. The reactor problems had grown worse. Red warning lights flashed throughout the outpost as Zoltan walked the corridors that morning. He noticed humans moving with greater speed, their voices tense. "All non-essential personnel to evacuation pods," announced a voice over the speakers. "This is not a drill." Zoltan hurried toward his ship docked at the east airlock. The outpost shook, and he stumbled against the wall. A loud explosion came from somewhere deep in the structure. Smoke began to fill the corridor. "Alien visitor," called the voice on his communication device. It was Susan. "Get to evacuation pod 3. Your ship section is damaged." Zoltan changed direction, but a violent tremor knocked him down. Metal groaned overhead. The ceiling collapsed in front of him, blocking his path with twisted metal and broken pipes. Behind him, flames erupted from a ruptured fuel line. He was trapped. The heat grew intense. Meridians could withstand higher temperatures than humans, but even his limits would soon be reached. Zoltan called for help on his device, but only static answered. Through the smoke, a figure appeared. It was Jack, walking calmly through the flames. "Stay there," Jack called. "I'll get you out." Zoltan's eyes widened in disbelief. No human could survive such heat. Yet Jack moved through the fire as if it were merely warm air. The flames seemed to bend away from him. Jack reached the fallen debris and placed his hands on a metal beam that would take 3 humans to lift. He pushed it aside effortlessly. "This way," Jack said, extending his hand. Zoltan hesitated, his scientific mind racing to explain what he was seeing. "We don't have time for you to process this," Jack said. "Trust me now." Question later. Zoltan took Jack's hand. It felt cool despite the inferno around them. Jack pulled him through the gap and led him through corridors filled with fire and smoke. Twice, they passed through sections where the hull had breached, yet somehow Zoltan could still breathe. They reached the evacuation pod where other humans waited. Susan looked relieved. "You found him." "Thank goodness." "Everyone here?" Jack asked, appearing completely normal. No burns, no signs of smoke inhalation. "All accounted for," said a man in an officer's uniform. The pod launched, carrying them away from the failing outpost. Through the window, Zoltan watched the habitat's main reactor section burst in a flash of blue energy. Hours later, aboard the rescue ship that collected their pod, Zoltan found Jack alone in an observation room. "You walked through fire," Zoltan said. "You moved through vacuum. You lifted metal no human could move." Jack looked at him with those eyes that sometimes seemed ancient. "Did I?" "I saw it. My recording device saw it." Zoltan held up his research pad. The screen showed only static. "How is this possible?" Jack smiled slightly. "Equipment malfunctions are common during reactor failures." "What are you?" Zoltan asked directly. "A maintenance worker who was in the right place at the right time." Jack stood up. "The others need someone normal to talk to. Someone who just fixes things. It helps them feel safe." His voice grew softer. "Could we keep what you think you saw between us?" Before Zoltan could answer, Jack walked away, stopping to comfort a crying human female with such ordinary compassion that Zoltan began to doubt his own memories. But that night, as the ship traveled to the larger human colony on Proxima Centauri, Zoltan began his investigation. Jack Winters was not what he appeared to be, and the xenanthropologist was determined to discover the truth. The rescue ship arrived at the larger human colony on Proxima Centauri, key 2 days later. The colony housed 5,000 humans in a domed city built between tall rocky mountains. Despite losing their outpost, the humans quickly settled into temporary housing and resumed their work. Zoltan was given a small research office in the science section. He sat there now, staring at his datapad. His search for information about Jack Winters showed nothing before 5 years ago. It was as if the human had simply appeared one day. "Computer access for non-humans is limited," said a voice from the doorway. A human female stood there, her dark hair pulled back tightly. "I'm Dr. Linda Martinez, Chief of Science." Zoltan quickly closed the file on Jack. I am only doing my research. Linda stepped inside and closed the door. You're researching Jack Winters. I saw your search requests in the system. Zoltan's skin changed to a deeper blue, a sign of alarm in meridians. I am simply cataloging all humans at the colony. Linda sat down across from him. You saw something during the evacuation, didn't you? Something he did. Zoltan hesitated. Then he remembered Jack moving through fire. Yes. Linda nodded slowly. We all have. At some point or another. There are 12 of us who know something is different about Jack. We don't talk about it, not even with each other. Not really. Linda looked tired. The first time for me was when a child fell off a cliff during an expedition. Jack was at the bottom before the child was even halfway down. Impossible fast. He caught her. Later, he said he was already at the bottom looking at rock samples, but I saw him standing next to me when she fell. Zoltan leaned forward. What is he? I don't know. None of us know. But he's never harmed anyone. He only helps. Linda stood up. I shouldn't have said anything. We don't talk about it. After Linda left, Zoltan sent a message to the Meridian Collective. He encoded it personally, marking it for the Science Council only. He described the events at the outpost and his suspicions about Jack. That night, Zoltan followed Jack from a distance. The human walked to an isolated observation dome at the edge of the colony. There, alone, Jack looked up at the stars. Zoltan watched through enhanced viewers. What he saw made him drop the device in shock. Jack stood with his arms slightly raised. Tiny points of light circled around his fingers, like miniature stars dancing to his movements. The air around him shimmered with colors Zoltan had never seen before. For a brief moment, Jack seemed to disappear completely, then reappeared a few meters away. When Jack turned toward the dome wall, Zoltan ducked down. He waited several minutes before looking again. Jack was gone. Enjoying the view? Said a voice behind him. Zoltan spun around. Jack stood there, though the entrance was 20 meters away. How did you? The same way you tracked me here. Jack smiled. Curiosity. I saw what you were doing with the lights, Zoltan said. Just a relaxation exercise. No human can create light from their hands or teleport. Jack sighed. Maybe I'm good with technology. Maybe I had a device you couldn't see. Who are you really? Zoltan asked. Before Jack could answer, Zoltan's communication device buzzed. It was an emergency signal from the Meridian Collective. A scout ship was approaching Proxima Centauri. Your people were quick to respond to your message, Jack said. You know about my message. I encoded it personally. Jack's eyes showed that ancient depth again. Nothing is truly hidden in this universe, Zoltan. You should prepare. Your people may not understand what they find here. As if to confirm his words, alarms began to sound throughout the colony. The colony went into emergency mode. Humans rushed to secure stations as red lights flashed throughout the dome city. Zoltan followed Jack to the central command room, where colony leaders gathered around display screens. Unidentified ship approaching at high speed reported a woman at the communications panel, not responding to hails. The colony commander, a tall man named Alan Rogers, looked grim. Battle stations. Activate defense shields. It's a Meridian scout ship, Zoltan said, stepping forward. They must have received my message. All eyes turned to him. Commander Rogers frowned. What message? I reported unusual energy readings, Zoltan said, not wanting to mention Jack directly. Standard protocol. Jack stood quietly in the corner, watching. The screen showed the Meridian ship entering orbit. It was small but heavily armed, with the sleek design typical of collective military vessels. They're scanning us, said the communications officer. Deep scan, sir. They're looking at everything. Jack stepped forward. They're focusing on power signatures. Commander Rogers looked surprised. How do you know that, Winters? Before Jack could answer, the officer called out. They're charging weapons. "Our shields won't hold against Meridian weapons," said Dr. Martinez, who had joined them. "We need to evacuate." The first blast hit the colony's outer shield, making the ground shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They're targeting our power core," Jack said calmly. "They think it's a weapon." Zoltan realized with horror what was happening. His message about Jack's abilities had been misinterpreted. The collective thought the humans had developed some new energy weapon. "I can explain to them," Zoltan said, moving toward the communication station. "This is a mistake." Another blast hit, stronger than the first. The lights flickered. "Shields at 40%, someone reported. "One more hit like that, and we're exposed." Jack walked to the center of the room. "I'll handle this." Commander Rogers stepped toward him. "Jack, no. Whatever you're thinking." "It's time, Alan," Jack said softly. "You've always known this day would come." To Zoltan's surprise, the commander simply nodded and stepped back. "Everyone, stay calm." Jack walked out of the command center. Zoltan followed him, along with Dr. Martinez and the commander. Jack moved quickly through the corridors until he reached an airlock. Without putting on a suit, he pressed the cycle button. "Jack, wait," Zoltan called. "You can't survive out there." Jack smiled. "You know that's not true." The airlock opened, and Jack stepped out onto the surface of the planet. The toxic atmosphere swirled around him, but he walked forward steadily. On the command center screens, they watched as Jack stood alone on the rocky ground. Looking up at the Meridian ship, the vessel fired again, this time aiming directly at him. The energy beam struck where Jack stood. When the light faded, he remained standing, completely unarmed. Jack raised his hand. His body began to glow with blue-white light. He grew taller, his form expanding until he stood as large as a small building. The light around him intensified until his human features were barely visible within the glow. A voice boomed across all communication channels, in all languages simultaneously. "You will not harm them. They are under my protection." The Meridian ship fired again. This time, the beam stopped in midair, frozen a few meters above Jack's glowing form. The energy dissipated harmlessly. In the command center, everyone watched in silence. Commander Rogers whispered to no one in particular, and now they know. Zoltan stared at the screen, his 4 eyes wide with shock. "What is he?" Dr. Martinez looked at him with a mix of fear and awe. "We've been asking that question for 5 years." 3 days passed after Jack's display of power. The Meridian scout ship remained in orbit, silent and watchful. More ships arrived, forming a small fleet above the planet. The largest was the collective flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed all others. Zoltan received orders to arrange a meeting between Jack and the Meridian Council elder who had arrived on the flagship. When he found Jack, the man was in the colony garden, helping children plant seeds. "My people want to meet with you," Zoltan said, still uncomfortable with what he had witnessed. Jack looked up, soil on his hands. "I know. How should I describe you to them?" Zoltan asked. "What term should I use?" Jack smiled as he patted the soil around a small plant. "Jack works fine." The meeting was set in a neutral location, a large dome built quickly between the colony and the landing site of the Meridian ships. Humans and Meridians worked together to prepare it, though the tension between them was clear. Jack arrived wearing his usual maintenance uniform, still stained with oil and dirt. Zoltan walked beside him, feeling strangely protective of both Jack and the elder who would soon meet him. The Meridian elder, Vexora, waited inside. She was old even by Meridian standards, her skin a pale gray-blue with age markings across her face. 4 armed guards stood nearby. "You are the entity called Jack Winters?" Vexora asked when they approached. "I am," Jack said simply. Vexora studied him with all 4 eyes. "You appear human." "I appear as I choose to appear," Jack replied. The elder's skin darkened slightly, a sign of anger or fear. "What are you truly?" Jack looked around the room at the humans and Meridians watching. Commander Rogers stood with Dr. Martinez. Both nodded slightly to Jack. "I am very old," Jack began, his voice soft yet somehow filling the entire dome. "My kind existed before your stars formed. We have been called many things by many species: gods, angels, demons, star walkers. Most of these names miss the point. You are not from this universe?" Vexora asked. "I am very much of this universe. I am just more connected to it than you are." Jack made a simple gesture with his hand, and tiny points of light appeared between his fingers, swirling like miniature galaxies. "I can touch the fabric of reality in ways your species cannot yet comprehend." "Why are you here, with humans?" Zoltan asked the question that had bothered him most. Jack closed his hand, and the lights vanished. "I walk among developing species sometimes. We all do. I chose humanity because of their fascinating duality. So fragile yet so resilient. They know they are small in the universe, yet they never stop reaching outward." Vexora's translator made a sharp sound, the Meridian equivalent of a scoff. "They are primitive. They have only just learned to travel between stars." "They are young," Jack corrected, "and full of potential." "Are there others like you?" Commander Rogers asked. Jack nodded. "Many. Some walk among humans. Some among Meridians. Some among species you haven't met yet." This revelation caused murmurs among both groups. Vexora's skin paled further. "The old stories," she whispered. "The legends of star walkers who guided our ancestors. They were real." "Yes," Jack said. "Your people simply forgot as you grew more technologically advanced. You began to believe you were the apex species of the galaxy." Vexora stood straighter. "We are advanced. We have conquered the stars." Jack smiled, but his eyes held that ancient depth that made Zoltan shiver. "You have visited some stars. That is not the same thing." Zoltan noticed Vexora's guards exchange worried glances. Something was wrong. The elder was not accepting this new reality well. "We will discuss this further," Vexora said abruptly. "I must consult with the full council." As she turned to leave, Jack called after her. "Consider carefully what you consult them about, Elder. Some revelations cannot be unknown once shared." Vexora did not respond as she left with her guards. Zoltan felt a growing sense of dread. Zoltan could not sleep that night. The meeting with Jack and Elder Vexora had shaken him deeply. His entire understanding of the universe had changed. The Meridian Collective was not the most advanced power in the galaxy. They were just one of many young species, barely beginning their journey among the stars. He walked through the quiet corridors of the colony, thinking. When he reached the communication center, he noticed unusual activity. Technicians were monitoring signals between the Meridian ships. "What's happening?" he asked one of the human operators. "Heavy encrypted traffic between the ships," the woman replied. "They're planning something." Zoltan felt a chill. He knew Vexora well enough to guess what might be happening. The elder had always been proud, even for a Meridian. Learning that her species was not as important as she believed would have hurt her deeply. He hurried to find Commander Rogers, who was in his office reviewing defense plans. "I think my people are planning something dangerous," Zoltan said without greeting. "Vexora will not accept being second to anyone, even beings like Jack." Rogers looked up with tired eyes. "We've detected energy buildups in their fleet. They're preparing weapons." "They have a planet killer," Zoltan said quietly. "A weapon designed to break a planet apart at its core. It's only been used in tests before." Rogers stood quickly. "Are you certain?" "No, but Vexora would see it as the only way to eliminate a threat like Jack." Zoltan's skin paled with shame. "My people fear what they don't understand." "So do humans," Rogers said. "The difference is what we do with that fear." He pressed a button on his desk. "Find Jack Winters immediately." They found Jack in his small quarters, sitting cross-legged on the floor. He looked up as they entered, unsurprised. "They're going to attack," Rogers said. Jack nodded. Yes, they're afraid. They have a planet-killer weapon, Zolfon added. It could destroy this entire world. I know. Jack stood smoothly. They believe killing me requires destroying the planet I stand on. They're wrong, but the humans here would die. We need to evacuate, Rogers began. There's no time, Jack said gently. Their weapon is almost ready. Zolfon stepped forward. I can try to talk to Vexora. Explain that attacking would be pointless. Jack looked at him with those ancient eyes. You could try, but she has already decided. Then what do we do? Rogers asked. I will stop them, Jack said simply. How? Zolfon asked. By showing them the truth. Jack turned to Zolfon. You have a choice to make now, Xenoanthropologist. Return to your people and forget what you've seen, or stay and witness what happens when a god stops pretending. The warning sirens began to sound throughout the colony. Outside, the sky turned red as the Meridian fleet moved into attack formation. Zolfon thought of everything he had seen. He thought of his duty to the collective, his years of training and service. Then he thought of Jack walking through fire to save him, of the children in the garden, of the humans who had accepted this powerful being among them without worship or fear. I will stay, he said finally. Jack smiled, and for a moment, Zolfon saw something beyond the human face, something vast and bright and ancient. Then watch the stars, my friend. Jack walked to the door. Rogers called after him. What should we do? Keep everyone inside. This won't take long. Jack's voice changed slightly, gaining harmonics impossible for human or Meridian vocal cords to produce. And remember what you see. Someone should record it for history. As Jack left the building, Zolfon and Rogers hurried to the observation dome. The Meridian fleet filled the sky, their formation centered around the flagship. A bright point of light was growing at the front of the formation. The planet killer warming up. Jack walked alone into the open, a single small figure against the rocky landscape, looking up at the fleet that had come to destroy him. Jack stood alone on the rocky surface of Proxima Centauris C. Above him, the Meridian fleet's weapons charge, their energy readings climbing to dangerous levels. The planet killer at the center of the formation glowed with building power. In the observation dome, Zolfon, Commander Rogers, Dr. Martinez, and others watched in tense silence. The screens showed Jack, still in his simple maintenance uniform, looking remarkably small against the vast fleet above. He can't possibly stop all those ships, someone whispered. Zolfon wasn't so sure. He had seen enough to know that appearances meant nothing when it came to Jack Winters. Outside, Jack raised his arms. His human form began to change. First, he grew taller, reaching the height of the colony's tallest buildings. Then his body started to glow. The blue-white light from before returned, but much stronger now. It spread outward from him in waves, rippling through the air. Jack's human features dissolved into pure energy. Where a man had stood moments before, now there was a towering being of light. It expanded further, growing until it was larger than the Meridian flagship itself. The communication system crackled to life. Vexora's voice came through, tight with fear and anger. Fire the planet killer. Now. A beam of destructive energy shot from the Meridian formation, aimed directly at the planet's core. It struck the light being that had been Jack. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then, with a gentle motion like someone brushing away dust, the being redirected the beam harmlessly into space. Another gesture, and every ship in the fleet suddenly powered down, their lights flickering off. What's happening? Rogers asked. He's disabled their systems completely, Zolfon said in awe. With a single thought, the being of light grew brighter. Then something extraordinary happened. Every Meridian on every ship suddenly cried out at once. Even Zolfon felt it, a vision flowing directly into his mind. He saw the universe as Jack saw it. Billions of galaxies spread out like a vast ocean. Countless worlds teeming with life. and threads of energy connecting everything, pulsing with power and purpose. He saw beings like Jack moving through this cosmic web, ancient and patient, watching over the younger species as they grew. The vision showed him the true age of the universe and the countless civilizations that had risen and fallen. The Meridians and humans were just the latest in a long line, each with their own path to walk. When the vision faded, Zoltan fell to his knees, overcome. Around him, humans were weeping or staring in wonder. On the Meridian ships, the effect was more dramatic. Many had collapsed. Some, including Elder Vexora, seemed lost in their own minds, unable to process what they had seen. Outside, the beam of light began to shrink, condensing back into human form. Jack stood there once more, looking up at the now silent fleet. The communication system came alive again, but with Jack's voice. "They will not harm you now. Most have understood what I showed them. Those who couldn't will need time to recover." Hours later, Jack met with Zoltan and the human leaders in the colony's main hall. "What happens now?" Commander Rogers asked. "Now I leave," Jack said. "It's time for me to move on." "Where will you go?" Dr. Martinez asked. "There are other worlds, other species who might benefit from a visitor," Jack smiled. "And there are others like me already here. Some among humans, some among Meridians." He turned to Zoltan. "Which is why I'm giving you a gift." Jack touched Zoltan's forehead gently. Instantly, Zoltan's perception shifted. The world looked the same, yet different. He could see faint auras around certain people, a subtle pattern in reality he had never noticed before. "So you'll recognize the others like me," Jack explained. "And remember that the universe is far larger and more wonderful than any species imagines." That evening, Jack Winters walked out of the colony. His body dissolved into points of light that rose into the stars. The Meridian fleet departed soon after, humbled and changed by what they had experienced. Zoltan chose to stay at the human colony as an ambassador. He often looked at the stars, wondering which of the beings around him might be more than they appeared to be. The universe, he had learned, was full of gods walking in mortal form, watching and guiding the younger races on their journey to the stars.